Hello and welcome to the Plumeca Remexis tutorial series. In this tutorial, we will discuss Stage 2 of implant planning, marking the nerve. So in our previous segment, we already did the orientation to be able to do our assessment of implant planning. So now we're going to go over to the left-hand side, and if you have a implant license in Remexis, the tab will say Implant. If you do not have an implant license, the tab will say Cross Section. Either name, it's the same module. So we click on that, notice that our already set up and pre-orientated pseudopan information gets carried over. We have a axial view in the upper left, we have our pseudopan rendering, and we have cross-sectional rendering and a three-dimensional volume or volumized rendering. Now, the first thing we want to do is set up our cross-sectional slices. You can use the scroll bar at the top to scroll the cross-sectional lines, and you want to put those over into the region of your implant, or where you're going to be placing your implant. Then in the upper right-hand corner of the cross-sectional window, click on the wrench icon. You can select what type of layout that you want, how many cross-sectionals. Right now we have a single row of 5. We can go ahead and do 2 rows of 5. Then we have 3 slider bars. This is the distance between slices. So if you drag it up, you can make the distance between each slice very large, or if you bring it down, you can make it as small as you wish. I'm going to go ahead and, for demonstration purposes, we're going to go ahead and set it at a 1 millimeter slice thickness between slices. The middle slider is for adjusting how much region in that slice that you want to show. So you can make it really narrow or you can make it really long. What we want to do is we want to balance it out so that we can see as much of we want to be able to see the bone of the cross-sectional slice with not as much tissue around it, just so we can isolate the region on the view better. The third slider bar is for the slice thickness view. So for instance, if you had a very thin slice cross-sectionals, they may appear grainy because of the thin slice. It's not showing as much information. And at a very thin slice, it may be difficult to pick up or discern the mandibular canal. So we probably want to go ahead and increase the slice thickness a bit. Gives it a more film-like appearance. We can see very good detail, trabecular bone, and we can now see the mandibular canal very clearly in the cross-sectional slices. So once we have a cross-sectional slice view, go ahead and click Done. Then we can adjust our slider bar to bring those cross sections into our implant region of interest area. Now, in order to mark a nerve, we can mark a nerve in 2 places. We can either mark it in the pseudopan or we can mark it in the cross-sectional views. Let's first mark the nerve in the cross-sectional views. In order to mark a nerve, we go over to the right-hand toolbar, we go under the nerve section, and we select the icon for draw nerve. We're going to activate that tool. We're going to start in our last slice, and we just left click to place the marker in the mandibular canal, just following it as we go, placing each one. And then for the last point, we want to double click. Okay. Now we have our nerve marking in each one of the planes. We can see the nerve marking in the pseudopan, and it's hard to see, but there's actually a nerve marking right here in the three-dimensional window, on our volumized rendering. We can actually make this nerve more presented if we go up to our nerve tools and click on the wrench, which is the properties icon. We can change the diameter of the nerve mark in order to fill the mandibular canal better. And then we can also change the color. For instance, we can use a nice red color. Now our mandibular canal is marked in red, and you can see over here it's marked in red here in the 3D volume. Now, in order to mark the nerve in the pseudopan view, let's first delete the current nerve marking by clicking it to highlight it, and then come over to the nerve tools and click on delete nerve. Now, in order to mark in the pseudopan, we need to thin out the view of the pseudopan. Right now, if you look at the axial view, here's our focal trough, basically, that's creating the panoramic view. It's pretty thick. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the upper right-hand corner of the panoramic window, click on the wrench icon, and we're going to use this slider bar to decrease the thickness of the arch. And I'm going to bring it down to approximately half a millimeter. Okay. I'm going to click on done. If you notice now in the axial view how thin that is now. Now we see very thin. We can actually start seeing some of the mandibular canal here. So now I want to make sure that I have my zoom toggle disabled. I can use my scroll wheel and I can scroll in the panoramic window. And I usually start back on the lingual side and then slowly scroll forward, going buccal until I can start seeing the mandibular canal. As you can see, I can start seeing it right here. So now I'm going to come over to my nerve tools, click on my mark nerve, draw a nerve icon, and I'm going to start plotting in the center of the nerve canal. And then I'm going to keep scrolling with my scroll wheel on my mouse, following the nerve canal. It'll snake through the jaw, so it'll go buccal, it'll go lingual. Sometimes you have to come back lingual and then go buccal again. But you just keep scrolling until you can see and just follow the nerve. Now this particular patient has an anterior hook, so we can follow that. And then I'm going to keep going buccal. I'm starting to see the metal framing right here. So I'm going to keep going buccal until I get to the edge of the metal framing. And then I'm going to double click my last marker on the metal framing. Now we have our marking down in our cross sectionals, and we also have it in the volumized rendering as well. Again, we can make that more visible to us if we change its color, and we can also change its diameter. Now you can see the nerve marking here, including the anterior hook. Now, notice that because we're so thin sliced in the pseudopan that we really can't see the nerve in here completely. So what we can do is first scroll back, bringing our curve to the center of the mandible. And then we come up to our wrench icon in the upper right and thicken the slice view. Now we got our pseudopan and we can see our complete nerve here. Now we can adjust our slider for our cross sectionals to encompass the region that we're looking at and doing the implant placement. And now we have a perfect nerve marking that we can go by in our cross sectionals. And at this point, we can move on to stage 3 of implant planning, measurement, and placing the virtual implant.